kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Patrick Skeyhill. This season, G versus Wing, and that means my co-host is the bearded man,
Bob Skerry. Use paper towels from Bounty.
What?
Bounty. The guy from Bounty, I think. I forget which one of the two paper towels had it, but they used to have that guy with the flannel shirt. He was like this big lumberjack guy. And he would be the one that helped people out with paper towels. That used to be like part of the ad campaign.
Well, who do they have now?
I don't remember if it was Bounty or what was the other big name paper towel company?
Mr. Sparkle.
Mr. Sparkle! Uno yo besto wahoo!
No.
And, of course, the incomparable Lev Van Rensselaer on the audio boards. And, of course, you can listen to us wherever podcasts are sold for free. But also, we are on YouTube. You can find our playlist at Quixotic Harmonics. Bob, let's talk about episode 39 of both G Gundam and Gundam Wing. But before we do that, Bob, how's your week been going?
My week's been going okay. Had a number of hiccups with the latest Windows 10 update. This is roughly the end of March on recording, and they rolled out a new series of updates that were notably ruining a lot of people's PCs if they got them a little too early. Happened for mine for a moment. I rolled mine back. All my tech is fine. I'm going to be getting some new recording software. My digital audio workspace, also known as a DAW, is going to go from Audacity to Adobe Audition. I'm going to bite that bullet, and I'm hoping that this is going to further incite me into doing more recording.
I have been using Audition for many, many years. I, in fact, use it to edit this podcast.
Oh, lovely. I love to hear that.
Mm-hmm. April Fool's is coming up as of this recording, and I'm working on an April Fool's video essay. Very excited there. Also, my other podcast, What the Hell Happened to Them, this season currently focusing on filmography of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. We are doing an April Fool's episode of that as well. And on more productive news, one of my actresses has flown into America from the Czech Republic. I was able to meet with her and do some in-person, socially distanced rehearsals with her. That was very exciting. I have a shoot this next week where I will be a first assistant director, and that means a lot of paperwork. So not very exciting there. I've also been able to take a look at some LED volumes in the vicinity where I live over here on the West Coast, trying to find a good match for my upcoming project I will be shooting in June. But that's all for me this week. Bob, you want to get into our plot descriptions of episode 39 of G Gundam?
The Ultimate Attack. Duel with Master Asia, or, in Japanese, Sekya Tenkyoken, Keto Master Asia. So I can tell you that Keto means duel. Okay. So the act of dueling, Duel Master Asia, not to be confused with the mediocre card game Duel Masters. Sekya Tenkyoken is the name of the technique. It is not a translation for the ultimate attack. That was how they decided to depict it here in the States.
Well, in the show, they dub it, "We will teach you the ultimate attack," but after that, they say that name over and over again, and I'm just like, this is really long for them to say. I wonder why they say it so much. So it sounds like they too had a hard time translating. It's
literally the name of the attack. Yeah. And every time the attack is used, whether by Master Asia or by Domon, they use the incant.
Yeah.
Sekya Tenkyoken. It was translating roughly to from the skies and earth fist. So I feel like it's some sort of heaven and earth fist of some kind.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, over here in Gundam Wing, we have Troa's return to the battlefield, or in the Japanese, Teroa Senjo I Kairu. And Kairu, right, meant battlefield. We talked about that before.
Yes, we have talked about the battlefield before, which I'm to understand is Kairu. And then Senjo is probably coming from the same place as Sanjo, which we talked about in an episode or two previously. Sanjo is to come, to arrive. So Senjo, based on my understanding here, is probably something to the effect of return. Just as Tanjo, which is the reason why I even brought this up the prior episode, is to be born.
In this episode, Kans approaches Zex in hopes of having him join the White Fang with his Gundam. Zex, though, walks away, while Duke Dermail intends to continue using Relina as a figurehead. Dorothy and Marquis Wayridge conspire with the other members of Roma Feller to make Relina queen in power and name. Meanwhile, White Fang's repeated advocates also try to convince Duo to leave and join them with his Gundam. Troa, Katra, and Noin are mistaken as White Fang members by an Oz unit in the ruins of a nearby colony. After turning the tide of the resultant battle, Duo agrees to join their group. All right, episode 39 of G Gundam. I am not sure why I'm supposed to think, both as a person watching the show and as a sports fan, why watching the two undefeated people vie in a battle, since both of them are going to make the final round anyway.
Again, based on my understanding of things here, it is a matter of, for the onlooker, the general watcher of these things, it's to see who is going to take the lead in terms of the power placement by the end of the Battle Royale. You have these two undefeated individuals. I'm going to use a clearly similar situation here. NASCAR.
Okay.
When racing is done, whoever is currently leading the boards gets to take a better position to continue to lead, if I understand correctly. I know nothing of racing beyond some simplistic stuff that's used in like Mario Kart.
Yeah, but so how does that translate to a battle royale? Do they get to come in later? Do they get to start on higher ground? Like, how does that work?
It's been years since I've seen this part of the series. So I'm not going to be able to say definitively, but my understanding would be it would be akin to that. It's either they're going to get an advantage of some kind, like getting to have a few moments to get a better sense of the battlefield, being able to take a higher position in the area before others come in. You know, go 1, go 2 and 3, go 4, 5, and 6. So however many people are allowed into this thing, I'm going to throw a number out there and say something to the effect of 9 or 10.
Yeah. So, you know, we talked a week or two ago about making the show more revolving around the Gundam tournament proper. And I think another advantage of that is you get to let everybody know how exactly it works a lot sooner than right before it's necessary or right when it happens. And that could help seed some of these stakes, because it's still problematic that Domo needs to win all his matches if he doesn't even fight Master Asia until the Battle Royale anyway, which he doesn't need to win all of his matches to get into.
Yeah. So again, as I said weeks and weeks ago, it was a boast that is now necessary for people to take Neo Japan's fighter seriously, because up to this point, for all true matches, I'm using air quotes here, kids, he has won. For him to be considered undisputed and to be able to unseat someone who has won the tournament after a 3-year hierarchy of New England's domination, he has to unseat Neo Hong Kong. And where people do know that he was trained by the current Gundam fighting champion, he has to be able to prove his self-worth by being not just a second-rate Master Asia. He has to be able to beat the current champion who is his teacher, as well as all these seemingly amazing fighters that are just now coming onto the scene at the same time as him. See literally everybody else that we've known throughout the series.
Well, I think a good way to do that is by just winning the tournament, because nobody can then argue with you, because now you're the kings of space.
I think there's I understand your logic.
Yeah.
But I'm also realizing that there's a key difference. I think there's a key difference in our mentality here.
Okay.
Where I am a person who's been devout to this series for the entirety of my knowledge of it, I understand this ability to communicate with one's fists more directly than you, who has this wide breadth of understanding with not just Gundam as a general war story throughout the course of the various series that you've read and seen and what have you, your consumption. But I also feel like this is a difference of our mentalities. You are much more a logic and thoughtful individual, and I'm more of an emotional individual. I tie to Domon because of both his positive and negative traits. I'm quick to jump to things without necessarily thinking certain things through and reacting on my emotions. Were I to be a more combative individual, I'm sure I would get my ass kicked a number of times simply because I wasn't paying attention and running on pure emotion. You, on the other hand, very much do play more like a standard Gundam pilot, where you have to think things through, you have to strategize and be analytical and everything else. In all effects and regards here, I would say that you are much closer to being a Schwarzbruder or a Master Asia to my Domon.
Well, so that's what's interesting in your takeaway of the show, is that most martial arts properties that I've come across, including what Schwartz was trying to teach Domon, is to not go with your emotions and to stay focused outside of them so you can win your matches that way.
Yes.
Okay.
No, and I agree with you on that point. Domon is, up until the very end of the series, an incredibly flawed fighter.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay.
He is very powerful, but he is not entirely capable of understanding how to communicate with people as much as he is fighters.
Yeah.
It's the difference of being incredibly fluent with people in a very specific niche, but then incapable of sharing yourself with the general populace.
And speaking of Domon's strong emotional reactions to things, did he seem to overreact to Rain losing, what's her name, Allenby?
Absolutely.
It seemed to come like, I was like, how did you get this angry so quickly, Domon? Turned my head for a second, and now you're yelling at Rain? She's so nice.
Because they have their childhood friendship.
Yeah.
Along with the fact that he has made this new friend who he knows he can communicate with versus this person that he has this closeness to that he feels he can release himself against. He is foregoing the ability to understand her position, her predicament of doing her best, even though it was a simple accident. He doesn't acknowledge that there were more fine details to the situation because he was panicking about the loss of a really great fighter individual who was prone because she's often manipulated. So he's trying to care for, how I would perceive it, a little sister, but from Rain's perspective, a potential love interest. And so that's another nail in the coffin between the two of them until we get to Endgame.
Yeah, this moment, definitely necessary, considering what the relationship has been before then. And it comes at a good time, considering there's only 10 episodes left. For those of you following at home, that's about 3/4 of the way through the series. That means we need to hit our low point to get us into our third act. So it's a good timing for it there. Domon is led by Master Asia's horse to a boat, and the boat seems to be remote controlled.
It is one of two things, and I'm going to go with the latter of these two.
Yep.
It's either horse controlled, because this is a very intelligent horse as we've come to see so far.
Seems like it.
But more likely than not, it was a preset go forward, go back. It's not that Funsaiki necessarily had control of the boat as much as here, preset coordinate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if it had been in like a speedboat, I might have been on board, but it's like a little wooden rowboat, and it's just like, and I go, all right.
We also have a situation where robots can jump out of the Statue of Liberty.
I know.
Sometimes you just got to
How did you even get in there? Yeah, speaking of that, it seemed, I guess the two
Are you jumping forward to where I think you are?
I want to tell you, there's 2 points that make me think of this. The first one that's a little less egregious is they're deep underground. They fall into these Hong Kong underground tunnels, or like they're on an island. These tunnels were built between Hong Kong and the island. And Domon goes to call out his Gundam. How does how does the Gundam hear these things? How does that work?
If I'm to understand correctly, there is a voice activated mechanic on their person. Like they keep a Bluetooth or something on their person. And so it would translate into voice activation. And so they don't use those terms if you try to read the manga or whatever. But if you read things from the manga or show Bible or whatever, they have a device, and that device allows for voice activated actions.
Yeah. And then the other thing that stood out to me, and I'm surprised I never thought of this before, is we get to see Domon get his suit put on, and Master Asia gets a suit put on, and then the horse gets its suit put on.
We spend the most time on the horses.
Yeah, because we haven't seen that before. Yeah. But now I'm thinking, how did any of them get into these mobile suits? Like, how? Is there like a door in the foot that opens and it brings you up? Like, how is the horse going to make it up to a cockpit of a horse Gundam?
We know how Domon gets into his and how most other people get into theirs. With Domon, he uses the Corelander, his little hover car.
Yes, that's right.
And so it's understood that most of the others can do that. And unless you're going to do a very laissez-faire prep for a fight situation where you can probably just crawl up your hanger and go in that way, you bound up to the center shaft where you can have the chest open like we've seen in all the other Gundam series.
Yeah, so they all just jump up. The horse jumps up to the top.
I'm sure that if it's not that, remember, Master Asia comes on a platform. The platform is what transforms into Funsaiki.
Okay, so then how does the horse get in there?
Well, I mean, it's a platform, so you just... It's like a UFO or something, right? It's a big old heckin' donut. You can either just walk in through a door that's on a side of the circle, or there's a little trotting ramp that you can go up, and you don't have to go slow because you are a healthy horse as opposed to an orange sack shit. Yeah, no, that's how I would read it.
Master Asia shows off a secret technique while they're in the tunnels, which seems to just be a giant palm print. He smashes so hard with his palm, it magnifies the attack. Is that correct?
That's his iteration of the Sekiha Tenkyoken.
I see. Okay.
In the manga, they literally just make it look exactly as Domon uses it, which is almost a Kamehameha. But in the anime, what we've done is the way that Master Asia has been able to develop the technique of this school. He forces his palm out, and we see that there's a little... a medallion, a talisman on the hand that has a character on it. Because I don't know any kanji, I couldn't tell you what that kanji means, but I'm sure it has some effect to it, whether that means Asia or if it means force or something like that, you know. But in Domon's case, it seems that his is closer to an energy beam, energy blast sort of thing in the way of a Kamehameha.
There's a nice moment that you might need, though I'm still a little uncertain with what they want me to think of Master Asia at this point, but I don't want to go into that because I think future episodes will likely clear that up. But there's a nice moment. It
will very much start.
There's a nice moment here where Domon has to help him, Master Asia, up because his leg is hurt, so he can't jump, he says. But then, as they are about to get out of the tunnels, he can jump very high. Is this so that it looks cool? Is that the goal?
Interesting, but no. It may not be said on your side, so that way they can make it look like he was faking to teach Domon all along. On my side, at least per my dub, or my sub rather, the statement goes, he can't use that leg. It's not awful, but it's bad. It's bad enough that he can't move around as easily. We've seen him bound around in the Tokyo subway system, beep, 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 before. He can't do that here, so they have to walk at a decent pace, normal pace. When they get up outside of this tunnel, he's able to use one of his legs to bound forward. It's like a crane kick. You don't want to stay on that foot the entire time because anything you're fighting is going to start aiming at your weak point now. What he says is he's going to use Funsaiki as his legs. That's why we even have the whole horse transformation sequence. And I mean, this pairs pretty well with what we've been seeing the past few episodes where it seems like he's coming down with the consumption or something. His body is not able to maintain as easily.
All right. I mean, that's really it for me on this. This one's mostly I don't want to say transitional, but it seems like it's setting up a lot of stuff that's about to happen. And it's just getting us to
this
that
and
point.
next episode are exactly that.
Yeah, and it's not that different from what this episode is in Gundam Wing, where it's just meant to kind of bridge us to new things that are about to happen.
I like this one visual, and I don't know if you paid enough attention to it or not. There is a moment where Domon from up high has to send down the other half of Asia's scarf, his ribbon, to him, and we hold on it for a moment where we see them in profile, and Domon is looking down at Asia.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there may be some connotations to Judeo-Christian iconography involving the use of Master Asia and his current positioning, as well as Domon, who's represented by the God Gundam at the moment. I wouldn't say it's the God creating, the God touching Adam's finger thing. It's not supposed to be that, but I'll get into it when we get to an episode where it will matter.
Okay.
Aside from that, I would also note that they're tied by a string of fate. And I would use this scarf here as that thread. Typically, the thread of fate is depicted as a red piece of string that ties between one person and another, showing that their fates are tied to each other, whether that be romantically, dramatically, tragic. One's got to kill the other. They're both going to die at each other's hands, something like that. While the coloring here would not suggest it, I feel this is a great interpretation of the idea that their fate together is as such, and we're going to see something with that in the near future.
So I am not willing to disagree with you on that, but I would say, as a word of caution to all the young storytellers out there trying to understand their craft better, that's not a great way to go about it. It's too intellectualized, and if you're doing that, you're taken out of the moment. Why I think it still works fine, even if you don't find that thread of fate connotation, is it's a literal bonding between the two. And it might be a hint at what the show wants us to think about Master Asia at this time in relation to Domon, despite what the last 15 episodes have kind of portended. So that's my advice to you out there. Try not to get too bogged down in metaphors, because they can, if in a visual medium, they can kind of ruin the experience. So what's standing out to you in Gundam Wing this week?
Okay. The very first thing that came up while watching the opening and everything else.
Yeah.
The guy who seems to be the head of White Fang looks too human compared to all the anime characters. Like, disturbingly so.
That's an interesting note.
Yeah, I mean, compared to everyone else that we have seen throughout the series, even when you start looking at the older men like Tubarov and Vermeil and whoever, this guy, whose name you said earlier was
Cans,
feels too realistic by comparison of like seeing him versus Zex in the diner there.
Yes.
It is a very stark contrast between the Bishonen that is Zex and I'm sorry, his name again. I'm going to need it a few times.
It's Cans. Yep.
Cans?
Yeah, Cans.
Okay, I heard Ans before, so Cans. Got it.
Quinze.
It's not Keens. The visualization of Cans is just a little jarring when you start comparing. I do like the very tense scene that he has with Zex in the diner that isn't really resolved by the end of the episode. We talk about how Zex feels like this is too easy of a piece and starts contemplating whether or not he and Epion should go along with White Fang, because he is at this point a soldier and he can't see peace for peace's sake without hardship and sacrifice.
Yeah, both Zex and Hero in this episode make mention of the worrisome nature of the peace that's here, and all the characters are going to kind of explore that notion as the show continues forward, because that's kind of the next thing to think about.
I was trying to avoid mentioning Hero because I was going to wrap it up, because I do like that it bookends itself. Yeah. Very much like the prior episode did. We see that both Zex and Hero have this bookending quality these past few episodes, where we see they're coming to the same conclusions, but from different sides of the line. Mm-hmm. But since we're going to bring it up anyway, it is interesting that we need to see the flaw of Hiro very much being presented right now, just like we did with Domon, in that he still doesn't seem to understand, or maybe he chooses to ignore, that Relina is doing something of great import. She is trying to play her pieces. Where she's playing chess, he's playing paintball. And I think that's a very accurate depiction here. He is trying to strategize as a military individual, a soldier, but he is not looking at it from the complexity of the inner workings of diplomacy.
Hiro returns to that old chestnut of wanting to kill Relina. We haven't done that in a long time.
Yeah.
And one could maybe read that the Zero has shown him a future, and it doesn't look good for humanity. Now, since the show doesn't go out of its way to let us think that, outside of surmising it, I would say what it does, the show does actively indicate, is that what Relina is offering is this look of peace, but inside of mankind, that need to fight is not yet extinguished. And so all you do is have people get too content while the wars will still continue, as evidenced by the White Fang's existence and the Earth's need to eliminate them for their own survival. So he wants to get rid of, I think he wants to get rid of her so that the world doesn't fall into that trap and hopefully can find the way to extinguish that fighting necessity in man.
So that's your interpretation, though. That is not explicitly stated in outside pieces like manga or soft novels or anything like that, light novels, rather.
No, Zex says something similar to this akin, and Trace has said something similar to this as well. So those seeds are planted, and so it's easier to come to that read of Hiro's actions versus, especially when he uses the term false peace, versus, me being able to think that the Zero system showed him it's not going well, because that takes too many steps to get there.
Well, certainly. But I mean, I also have to wonder whether or not there's something that's going to come of how Hiro was tweaking the system, as we saw in the prior episode. We haven't seen what that prep that he's done to the Zero system, what that's going to culminate in, whether or not that's him having an easier handle on not being overwhelmed by the Zero, or if it means that he's able to mess with the Zero while not piloting, so that he can see potentialities by inputting commands or whatever. 90s techno garbage.
Yeah.
I did appreciate that the sand rock is very clearly shown here to not be built for space.
Yeah, they have not retrofitted it yet. They have not been able to do that. Noin does not have access to that technology. They will have to find someone who does.
And by way of that, I also want to note that Troa, having this episode be about his return to the battlefield.
Yes, I've heard that in the title. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good title.
Yeah.
I think that it's wild that muscle memory is so strong with him that he can take this white Taurus and utilize the firepower in a way that shows that even though it's not a Gundam, it can fight on par with, a lower tier version of a Gundam, if held by the right pilot.
Yeah, the muscle memory thing, I go back and forth on how much I like that, and it feels a little cheap or lazy to me. But two,
we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah,
go on, though.
Two, you're right. Yeah, and the things that make Gundam so powerful they do have extra weapons and stuff. Now, Troa only had just more bullets. Like, that was always his weapons design anyway, but it's the Gundanium alloy that makes them so strong, because they can withstand more attacks. And so they are much more fitted for this kind of one taking on a large group type of battle. And so if all Troa is doing is just firing guns and trying not to get hit, if he does have this muscle memory, he's pretty good at it already with his acrobatic kind of mindset.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to go with this, because I don't know, I'm not going to use the you never forget how to ride a bike bullshit. But
yeah.
The idea from that I think is applicable here is we have a tendency to, if we don't do something for a while, we're going to be a little rusty at first. And I think that it would have been nice to see him have to really get the fingers going on whatever triggers he has to use in order to properly pilot, especially where this is a standard unit.
Mm-hmm.
that I don't think he even used back before he went into his amnesic state.
No, the cockpits would all be the same because there's a universal standard, but some of the armaments might be a little different. But again, he just has less buttons to worry about in the Taurus.
Fair. I'll buy that. But yeah, I feel like it, in the way that you say it, if we were to redo this today, I would like 30 seconds or less of animation where it's just him trying to feel the buttons out and try to get his hands on whatever joysticks or other physical controls he has to use. And there might be a hiccup, which creates an easy laugh to break some of the tension, but also lets us see that he is having sparks in his head of where he used to be. To see old Troa come back in little bursts, in little bits. And you can depict that by the way that he goes from how he used to easily and coldly go into a cockpit versus this where it's, okay, yeah, and show a little more humanity now that he's gained that from losing some of that memory.
I could be persuaded in the ride-a-bike metaphor because he has spent 2/3 of his life doing exactly what he's doing, fighting in mobile suits. How I would rewrite this is it seems like this episode, the focus for his storyline is in him being willing to get out into space and get out in a cockpit, where I think we pretty much settled that last episode, so I don't want to do it again here. So I think you're right. This emphasis should be him trying to learn how to pilot. And you could spend more than 30 seconds on it because that's his arc. It's like trying to figure it out, and then somehow it is there. When Catra's in trouble, that memory kind of kicks in, and he can even be surprised by it, and maybe even a little afraid at how like efficient and ruthless in that moment of losing himself he did find it in that instinctual moment. Like that would be an interesting thread to explore. Or he's sort of afraid that that part of him does exist there where he wouldn't have before. So he goes and rescues Catra, well then technically Duo does. And then you have a moment where Troa's just like, was I capable of that? Did I used to kill people like these guys said? And then he could be very upset about that. Like that would be how I would do it. Very interesting.
Okay, that I'll buy. Yeah. That the upset of killing people so quickly and coldly and then having the delayed reaction, I think would create some great drama for the character who, honestly, at this point, I don't necessarily keep up in my hierarchy for the 5 Gundam pilots right now. Really does lean on Hero is having the deft subtlety of his growth occur, but also his skill and everything else is, he's our Gary Stu. As far as I'm concerned, he's our Gary Stu still.
What is that?
I have to ask because I don't know Save the Cat. If you know, I don't know anything about Save the Cat. I don't give a shit about Save the Cat.
Don't read Save the Cat, listeners. Don't do it, young screenwriters. Go on.
I don't care about Save the Cat, but without having to be a screenwriter or anything, most writers, especially of fiction, know the term of Mary Sue or the male equivalent, Gary Stu. If you know what a Mary Sue is, you know what a Gary Stu is. But for those who don't, dear listeners, a Mary Sue or Gary Stu is an individual who is perfectly prepped to handle the problems at hand. They are deftly capable of handling themselves to get out of danger. And a lot of early pulp characters and a lot of fantasy characters have been written as such. One of the most famous Mary Sue characters out there, self-insert type, would be Bella from Twilight. She has no great qualities, but she has no awful qualities. Everyone loves her, even though her personality is buh. And her special ability, her superhuman ability, she smells really nice to the supernatural. Like everybody loves to comment on how nice she smells. But other than that, she can just get into situations and get out of them and not really have to explain why or how she does. It's either everybody loves her or she happens to have enough experience at a thing to get out. Gary Stu, one might say, is someone like Luke Skywalker. Hey, people who are big Star Wars nerds that might disagree with me, Zaku Talk cast at gmail.com is a great place to go ahead and take a big old deuce on me verbally. You can go ahead and do that there. But Luke Skywalker would come to mind because apparently quick to pick up the Force, super great midichlorian count. Yes, I'm going to do that just to stir up the shit here. Great lightsaber wielder, is able to get out of a lot of problems with nary a nick on him, except for the loss of a hand. But, it's the character does not have to work too hard to get the results that he wants.
So interestingly, Cans himself goes to Zex to ask him to join. And why he does this is because, in fact, they know each other already. Now, they won't say this in the show, but they actually met 5 years ago when Zex, as an Alliance soldier, was captured by this colonial revolutionary force that formed in the immediate aftermath of Hiro Yui's death, trying to overthrow the Alliance that they blame for causing it. So he gets captured, but then has to pilot this weird tiger-like Gundam. And it's like this white mobile suit, and then he saves the day. It's a one-shot story, but that's why they call themselves the White Fang now, because that was the attack this Tiger Gundam would use.
Oh,
yes, and Kans's brother Tomas, in fact, developed the Zero system, but then was assassinated by the Alliance, and that's perhaps motivation for why Kans hates them, and it will be motivation for something else we'll find out later on. But, they also try to go to Duo. And so we're seeing they seem to want these Gundams as series of the revolution because it was the first sign of the colonies sending these robots down to Earth to overthrow oppression. That at the time was the Alliance, and now is just Romefeller, somewhat headed by Queen Relina.
Yeah.
So that's what they're trying to do there. Duo doesn't bite on that. And then says to Hildy, you found your niche, I gotta go now. I don't know what her niche is. I've seen no sign of niche. And Noin now seems to be dressed like a cowgirl.
Yeah, for a whole scene, and I had to point it out to my wife while she was working, that she just had one of those traditional shirts that has all the little tassels on it, the fringe. Yeah, I mean, it's the 90s.
Yeah, it's the 90s.
Western stuff was still big at the time, and you could find fringe on a lot of people.
Yeah, so, those are, another, like I said, transition episode sort of here, getting us prepped for stuff to come.
Yeah.
So here we go.
I mean, I'm sure that I could chew up a bunch more, but I don't know that I can make it unless we were to go the way we go.
Well, then we shall go there.
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
Now, I'm actually going to put what I had on pause because this, what was it, Gary Stew thing?
Yes.
So to raise an interesting question, because I kind of have this problem with Hero 2 for much of the show, and I think it's sort of part of the difficulty a lot of people have starting off the show, because we, especially early on, rely on that too much. And I think this is why leaning more into Relina being the main character in a rewrite would be useful, because she isn't that, right? She's fucking up all the time and figuring things out and having all these setbacks. And even when she has this new kingdom, that just gets blown up anyway. She has to surrender. So I think leaning on that is fine. And then this hero becomes this more quasi figure, and then it's kind of okay that he's that. But I don't want to get... I'm not sure if I want to get rid of it entirely, because moments that come up when he is surprised, like when he tries to find his death in Luxembourg, or when he's completely at a loss in dealing with Relina or dealing with Treize when he gets the Epion Gundam, like those moments have some weight to them, because these are these rare moments of weakness in Hero, and it is nice to see him off balance and to know that he can kind of fall to things too when he's not prepared. He's just more prepared than the other Gundams because of the training he went through specifically for this mission, whereas the others were a little more kind of last minute things, and you'll find out more about that in the movie rather than the show, and see how each of them kind of became pilots.
Sure. Well, I will touch on that before going into my way I go. I do feel like in this particular episode especially, we see that these kids are coming in, and none of them over the course of the series has had a great arc. They've had arcs, but they're very, very low and very easily curved. There's no super steep point for them compared to Relina, to which I agree. And I think about how if you were to redo this series, you really have to up the ante on all the characters to make them feel fully fleshed out. if you want to have the text read as having any of them be part of a ensemble cast of main characters. With Relina, it's a lot of ups and downs. We see her learn. We see her have to change and have to come to terms with how she's going to get to where she wants to be versus where she is. With somebody like Hiro, there's not really a whole lot of peaks and valleys. Hey, things in my way, I'm going to push through it. Another thing's in my way, I'm going to push through it. Oh shit, people don't like me, going to push through it. I doubt myself. Oh, but it's okay, Relina. Oh, I don't know how to do this. I got to find a purpose. Like it feels like a flat line of a character arc from this perspective at this moment. I'm sure that there's going to be the potential for a huge lore dump towards the end of the series and then coming last 10 episodes or whatever. I do feel like it is important that we acknowledge that, comparatively speaking, to the point that you've said from the beginning of the show, Relina is closer to a main character because she has greater arcs, greater hills and valleys than Hiro has throughout the course of the series proper.
So my argument to that is I think Relina's arc is not as big as you think, but it feels that way because she starts off so much lower than everybody else. She has the highest hill to climb. Another good reason to make her the main character. But also I think those other arcs for the main pilots, while subtle, are bigger than you think, but I think you're looking at the wrong things. And there's a chance you might kind of realize what's actually happening with them by the end, so I won't say it now, but I will kind of talk about those in length when the show wraps up.
Yeah, definitely prod me, because whether or not I say the same words that you're thinking, as is a common issue for you and I, we will probably be on the same page.
Yeah, and I think, and it's not, the things you're looking at and not seeing the arc makes sense because that's what we're trained to do and how we read media. And part of that is a symptom, and part of that has created Save the Cat as a symptom and then only reinforces this kind of bad reading of how a story should be told. And I think that just sort of dumbs everything down. And so while more modern shows are doing that because all studio executives now have to read that book, stupidly enough, we're still not in that area yet in the 90s, though there are other problems that come up because things aren't yet refined, but also not codified yet. So we're in kind of a weird area.
While I would love to do a Way We Go for G Gundam just to even things out, we've already talked about Suit Horse, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse. For those who can't see us right now, Skeyhill has his face in his hands, so I know I've done right.
Yeah, let me tell you what. So I saw the horse happen, and then I immediately texted Shinji, and I said, well, watching G Gundam, just watch the horse get into a Gundam and pilot it. And he says, yes, I don't know why I love that point of ridiculous, but I do. Probably because at this point, nothing matters. I don't know how to get to the specific point, but nothing seemed to matter in that show. They just did what they wanted because it was cool. Which I think is a little bit what you said, though he says it a little more mean.
He does say it a little more mean, and yeah, I kind of said it. But even the director, Imagawa, said something similar at the beginning in regards to why the Gundam would burst out of major monuments and areas. It's for the visual. It's for the aesthetic of the Super Robo-style shows. Yes. But what I was going to talk about was the We're Back part of Gundam Wing, where we normally would see a flash of several different characters before landing on Relina and then seeing our heroes. In this episode, and I don't know if it was different for you, it was only Relina. It held Relina the entire time on the comeback. Is there a reason that is going to become prevalent, or is it just a one and done situation?
Yeah, you've actually asked about this super early on in the series. There are seemingly random episodes where we only hold on Relina. I have yet to discover a pattern as to why they do it in certain moments.
Okay, because this is the first time I've seen them do it, so I don't know. I would always ask why it's a roulette that always lands on Relina. Now it's literally just Relina. We don't have our roulette of anybody else, Dr. J or anybody else.
Again, it's the first time you've noticed it, but it has happened in other spots. It's an easy thing to miss. Who knows when I first noticed it. I don't know why. I wish I did. I do try to figure it out each time I watch the series. I've yet to kind of get close on anything.
We're running a little long here. So instead, I think we should just have a nice quick cup of coffee over in the nerd corner.
Let's take a walk to the nerd corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah.
All right. I have recently finished for the third time, just last night, the newest season of Twin Peaks, The Return, premiered in 2017. And it feels silly giving it a nerd corner because I'm sure most people will talk or know about it, but I think a lot of people didn't like it for the wrong reasons. And this ties into my Way We Go, where I think we're taught to read media wrong. And so I think people come at Twin Peaks expecting a certain type of TV, especially in the modern day, after what Breaking Bad and Mad Men have given us. There's been a lot of talk about TV being cinematic, right? And I don't think they know what that means. And I don't even believe in that argument. I think the angles, the camera work has gotten very different. It's gotten like movies. And the characters have gotten a little more fleshed out, but none of those things feel cinematic to me. They're just TV has gotten, and maybe not clean is the right word, but sort of has been growing and has been, kind of growing and maturing might be the good word, but it's still TV, still very much TV. And even when these limited series come out, like True Detective or the Queen's Gambit, and I hear people talking that it feels like a movie, I actually don't think that's true because that episodic structure is still there and it's still very delineated like that. Even though there's an overarching major plot, but shows have been doing that for a lot longer than I think people realize. The end of the decade, the French Critics Association named the best movie of the 2010s the third season of Twin Peaks. And watching it this time, this might be the closest TV has ever gotten to being a movie. I could argue that this 18-episode series is in fact an 18-hour movie. Just sort of the way it kind of plays out and how we kind of get from episode to episode. And really the only thing that you could take out sort of these musical interludes in most places, not all, and just smush them together and it would be like a movie, just kind of the way it flows. And, there's no desire for it to be episode to episode. And I think that's what's throwing some people off. It's a really demanding show. You have to sort of pay a lot of attention, but you also can't overthink it or you're taking out of the flow and the tone of the show. And it's not here to give you answers. They're there, but you do have to work towards them. And this is what TV doesn't do because then you don't watch and then you don't pay attention to the ads and then the advertisers don't know what's going on and the executives don't know how to market it and it all becomes a big problem and then they don't let you do it. But they let one guy write and direct the whole thing, which is also unusual in TV, and let him do whatever he wants, which in low budget features is a normal thing as well. And so I think if you've watched it and you didn't like it, but you liked the original show, I would say give it another shot. And now that you're not going in with certain expectations and just let it happen, you will be sort of surprised at kind of the genius of what's going on here, even if you don't know how to put it into words. But that's what makes a good movie anyway. Otherwise, it should just be a book in my mind or a play.
I do have a thought on that real quick before I go into my nerd corner. I think it definitely comes from a place of wanting to use words that are shorthand, that people have come to the idea of cinematic, in that we are talking about the direct visual aspect of it is very clearly not Full House. It is not filmed in front of a live studio audience anymore. Most shows, whether it be the sitcom, the drama, or otherwise, allows for more movement, dolly shots, better lighting, et cetera, et cetera. We're seeing more people do that. We're also seeing the formula come to a head where so many people got into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're trying, both in terms of the viewer as well as a lot of media studios, to find their way towards that feeling of the epic while still being episodic. So you're getting people who get these either mini arcs within a season, or even sometimes just like full arcs that are part of this rotation, this washing machine effect of having all of them culminate into a cycle that gets to the end of the story. But don't worry about it, because we're going to give you a little stinger to let you know an idea of what might be happening down the line. And it doesn't have to happen next season, but you know a thing because you're the one paying attention. And then you have the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then you have other people who tried to do cinematic universes, RIP, the Universal Monster Universe, the Dark Universe, as it were called.
The problem with calling TV cinematic is that, and the reason why we had shows like Full House and even some early dramas were done in that style, is because it evolved out of radio, right? Which had to be done more like a play. And despite the fact that we're not in the studio audience, and the cameras can move because they're not giant things anymore, is that it's just cosmetic changes. We're still a radio. Everybody's still talking too much and explaining too much, because if the audience doesn't feel smart, they don't want to watch it so much. Or if they can't follow what's happening, they don't want to watch it. Or if they can't fold laundry or make dinner when it's on, they're less interested in sticking around. And so seeing television rise up and seeing movie sales go down, the studios have now, with these Marvel-type movies, started to go in that direction. They want to be more like TV, because everybody, for some reason, is saying TV is the new movies, even though it's not, again, because we're taught to read these things wrong. And so now the movies are talking too much and over-explaining things and beating us over their heads and talking down to us. And a show like Twin Peaks is one of the first TV shows I've seen not do that, and not care to do that, and again, have that single authorial voice behind it. And so if movies are going to keep having to do that because they need the spectacle and they need to make $1 billion off of it, like, we're just going to need these things like Twin Peaks or these movies like Burning or Nomadland to kind of help take us out, or to remember what cinema is, because it looks like the big studios don't care anymore about cinematic.
I do hope that people will eventually get to see at least one of several Skeyhill-led efforts, because having read his scripts and been a part of a few, the kid is going to bring back a new golden era of film. I mean, I stand by that statement.
It's out there already. You don't need me to do it. The problem is we don't know it. It's hard to find out about them because they just don't make enough money for people who matter to care. The vast audiences don't know. That's the issue. And we're not taught to read it. So then when you get to Twin Peaks, you just feel disappointed because you don't know how to engage with the text because of this goddamn cat.
Skeyhill?
Yeah.
Take the fucking compliment, please.
All right, Bob, tell me about your nerd corner.
I'm going to use my nerd corner this week to talk about an app that I'm only 2 or 3 days into, but has been helping me out immensely in terms of a mental, emotional, and spiritual health space. It's called Fabulous. If you go to Twitter, you can find Get the Fabulous or a few other handles like that. But it is an application that helps to organize certain parts of your day that you might lose if you're an erratic mess like myself. It gives a number of different tutorials, effectively, these meditations to listen to that are not necessarily meditations so much as brief 2 to 5 minute talks that let you work through some thought processes and help to recalibrate your brain and your habits to live a better life for what you're aiming to do. It starts off with just asking you to drink water when you wake up. Make sure you have a bottle of water next to you. And I wouldn't say gamify, but definitely celebrate you doing simplistic actions. You can do the very base level for free. I've already bought in on a year because it's worth it to me to do it for 1 year at the cost that I can get it at, compared to having to do a year's worth of therapy. I'm still doing therapy, but for the cost of one extra session, I've got somebody on my ass 24/7.
Yeah, I would agree with drinking water. It was a big part of my successful diet during the COVID era, drinking about half my body weight in ounces of water a day. And the results speak for themselves. I've lost almost 50 pounds, so very helpful.
Yep. And I'm trying to get back to that myself, as well as the next step that they have as part of my given route, as opposed to the stuff that I'm picking out for myself, to eat a good breakfast for 3 days in a row. And eating a good breakfast does not mean you have to have the complete balanced breakfast as presented by Golden Grams or some shit like that. It's have some eggs, have a large apple and some peanut butter. Have some plain oatmeal, not a flavored thing, just some plain oatmeal. Maybe throw some nuts in there or some very light amount of spices, but you don't have to go ape shit on sugar. Having made myself an egg breakfast today, I feel better mentally and physically. Like, I'm behind on getting my lunch right now. I'm about to do that once we're done here. I feel better today than I have the days prior. Whether that's placebo effect or not, I don't care. I'm having something that works, and I'm having accountability buddies because they have these circle things that, if you're still on Facebook, I'm sorry, but you could go to their group on Facebook and have a support system through that. There's a lot of good to be done through this app. And there are people that will say that it's number 6 in a list of 10 other types of organize your shit apps. I recommend Fabulous. Give it a look, and if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, well, it works for me, and it doesn't have to for you.
One last caveat I'll add, based on the examples you've given, is you can actually, most spices you can have as much as you want because they don't have any calories, or the calories are negligible. The foods you listed, while healthy, you have to be careful how much you eat, because these nuts and this peanut butter, and even depending on how you cooked your egg, if you have too much of those, while they are giving you some protein and vitamins you need, they are mostly fat. If you hard boil your egg, you can have more of them because you're not cooking it in oil. And I have nuts every day and I have peanut butter every day, but that's the majority of where my fat is coming from. But the apple's a great example. These are what's called nutritionally volume dense. So like if you eat grapes, if you eat a bowl of grapes, you're going to get full faster than if you eat a bowl of raisins, let's say. And again, that has to do with the water. But nuts, they're very small things. And so you would need to eat more nuts, but it's mostly fat. Now you're just putting more fat in you, but you need some, but you should definitely be having a lot of vegetables and some amount of fruit in your diet and things like that.
I mean, I'm going to even condense that further. Read the fucking labels, kids. And if it doesn't have a label directly on it, like with grapes or something, look it up. It's not hard to do. You can count calories. You can see what you're putting in your body, whether that be grams of fat, grams of sugar, grams of whatever. Take that into consideration when you start doing portions. Your one serving of peanut butter is effectively 2 tablespoons. And that 2 tablespoons gets you like 200, 300 calories, and then X number of grams of fat, this and the other. Keep an eye on those and just be smart about it. A phrase that I've heard used that I'm trying to take more consideration of is food as fuel. Are you going to put some junk fuel into you that's going to burn out real quick, like a bad set of batteries that you got at a dollar store? Or are you going to get the super high-end rechargeable Duracells and be able to last a lot longer on those? You're probably going to lean on that. Do the same thing with your body.
All right, let's thank Lev Van Rensselaer for minding those audio boards today. And, of course, let's thank my co-host this week, as he will be each and every week this season, Bob Skerry.
Hey, hi, Worldwide Sentai. This is Bob Skerry VOA coming at you live from Zaku Talk HQ. You can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, Bob Skerry VOA. You can also go to bobskerryvoa.com to listen to my demos because I'm, in fact, a voiceover artist. And if you want to help me out, you can also find their links to things like my Patreon and my Coffee. I would be more active on them. I'm going to be more active on them because I'm going to be making more sounds. Hire me.
And I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, animations, behind-the-scenes footage, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably with a similar sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience why balloons are man's best friend.
Well, if you talk to anybody who is a lunar, you will find out that you can get some sexual pleasure from watching the expansion of a balloon until it eventually pops. Go ahead, look it up. I'm not making this shit up. Lunars.
Self-bonding communication.